Hello, everyone, and welcome to the UCL M&A Group's brand new Diversity and Inclusion Week. My name is Nicola, and I'm the head of speaker relations at the group, and alongside me is May, our head of events. Following the huge success of our M&A Monday series, we felt obligated to address the importance of the diversity and inclusion topic within the investment banking industry as the society with largest social media presence in the UK. Therefore, during this 7-day event, you can expect interviews with heads of diversity and inclusion of leading investment banks, M&A advisors, and panel events, which will help students coming from diverse backgrounds break into the industry.
So to give you a quick background over Paulette, she started her career in the late 1990s as a communications officer at Save the Children. She later moved towards Windsor Leadership, where she ran leadership development programs for senior leaders. Since 2010, she has worked at Barclays, becoming the head of diversity and inclusion. She's focused on supporting diverse talents and building a culture of inclusion. So she's led the rollout of This Is Me, Barclays' campaign on disability, mental health and wellbeing, as well as currently sitting on the UK government's Disability Confident Business Leaders Group and the board of the Lawyers Appeal, Disability Forum and International Broadcasting Trust. Paulette, how are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to have been asked to join you today.
Well, we are very excited to have you.
And just to start from the beginning with the first question. So what prompted you to make the move from organizations such as Save the Children and Windsor Leadership to a large firm like Barclays? And to expand on that just a bit, what made you take the step from the head of global programs and community investment to the head of diversity and inclusion at the bank?
They're really great questions, Nicola, and they're probably very different answers. My background is quite unusual in the world of finance, in that I started off in the non-profit sector. So the bulk of my career was in the charity world, as May said. I worked for organizations like Save the Children, and Windsor Leadership was a charity as well. And I always thought that my career would be within the charitable sector. I describe myself as a charitable girl at heart, as a charity girl at heart. And I was looking for a career change, and a very wise man said to me, "Why don't you move to the private sector?" And I was like, I can't move to the private sector. I'm a charity girl. And he came up with this extraordinary line. He said, "Can you imagine what you could achieve if you could harness the power of business to affect social change?" And I think that's an extraordinary statement, because it says that business often holds the key to really enormous change, because it holds the resources, it holds people, it holds decision making. And I thought about this. I saw a job at Barclays, which I banked with Barclays all of my life, big household name, not a financial services company. And they were looking for a head of community investment. And so I applied for the job. And after, I think I had 9 interviews to get the job, I got the job at Barclays. And that was the move from the non-profit sector into the private sector. But basically, I was running Barclays charitable projects around the world. And it was a phenomenal experience. It really did prove that statement that chap had said to me, that if we could harness Barclays expertise, Barclays financial know-how, we really could affect social change. And we managed to introduce new systems of access to finance for some of the poorest communities in Africa, in India, and give people the chance to bank in a way that they've never been able to bank before. And without a bank like Barclays supporting that, these initiatives would never have happened. So, so that was the first step. And then the transition into diversity and inclusion happened when internally we changed the way we were doing some of our community investment work, some of our citizenship work. And I was working on women's economic empowerment as part of that work. And within the diversity and inclusion team, there was an opportunity. And I transferred across And I think that's a tip that I would share for anyone as they look for their careers, is that we all have transferable skills. And I was very lucky that I was able to transfer those skills from the non-profit sector to the private sector, and then from community investment into diversity and inclusion. So never ever be constrained by your own perceptions of your skills. They are often eminently transferable. Does that answer your question, Nicola?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that. And we'll also touch upon later for those transferable skills and your later advices to people looking to break into the world of finance. For now, I just want to touch upon one of the initiatives that you undertook after joining Barclays. You have led one of the hugely successful initiatives called This Is Me, focused on disability, mental health, and well-being, which was later adopted by over 200 companies. So could you tell us, how did the idea of this initiative come about, and what were some of the main challenges you faced while pursuing this campaign?
Yeah, This Is Me is an extraordinary initiative that came out of Barclays and has now been adopted by all of these other companies. Again, really shows the power of business, I think, here to impact on social change. But I can claim absolutely no responsibility for This Is Me. This Is Me was started in 2014 by 9 Barclays colleagues who wanted to talk about their own experiences of mental health and well-being, but they wanted to do it in a very unique way. You'll hear people talk about the lived experience and how you bring the lived experience to influence change. And these 9 colleagues said, we want to tell our story, but we want to tell our story so that we're not defined by our mental health challenges. We want to tell our story about us as the whole person. And that's how This Is Me story came into being. The 9 colleagues shared their stories. They recorded them very much as we're doing today. They actually recorded them on handheld devices and made these short films, couple of minutes long, about their own, the whole aspect of their life, of which their mental health and well-being was part of that. And then that grew. And it grew and it grew, and I was very lucky. I came in a couple of years later, and within Barclays now, over 250 colleagues have shared their stories. And it grew from just being about mental health and well-being to about mental health and disability and other health conditions. Then we told our story to the Lord Mayor's Appeal in the City of London. And they said, we think this is a great initiative. Other companies might like to do this. So in London, we set up a committee of Barclays and many other companies, mainly in financial services, professional services, consultancies, and they started to adopt This Is Me. And over 200 companies now tell stories under the umbrella of This Is Me. We then set up This Is Me in the northwest of England, the West Midlands, in Scotland, in Yorkshire, and it's now This Is Me in India and Asia Pacific as well. So the power of storytelling for anyone who's looking at diverse communities, for talking about diversity and inclusion, the power of storytelling cannot be underestimated. And This Is Me was a great initiative to do that. I think you asked about some of the challenges. Was that your follow-up question?
Yes.
I think I always say it just takes one person to tell their story, and then it can start to snowball. But sometimes a lot of companies do say, how do I find that one person? And you just have to trust that when someone does share their story, it will be very powerful. But I think keeping the momentum going is a challenge. We have done that at Barclays because it moved from mental health and well-being to disability. And now we use the power of storytelling for all of our diversity and inclusion initiatives one way or another, whether it's as This Is Me or as another initiative. But I think also there's what I call the top-down and the bottom-up approach. And that's another challenge. I think we've overcome it, but a lot of organizations think that that's a challenge. How do I get our leaders to buy into this? How do we get our leaders to support that concept of talking about mental health and well-being, sharing their own personal stories? And I think if you have support at the top of an organization and stories coming up from the bottom of the organization, you can keep that momentum going. That's very much how This Is Me has sustained itself within Barclays and within other organizations. The one other thing I would say is I think there's something very powerful about being authentic. We make sure that those stories are about the whole person. Any story that you see that's billed as This Is Me through Barclays is uplifting. We're not disguising the fact that talking about mental health challenges can be very difficult, but they do not define an individual. And the more authentic someone is in sharing that story, the more powerful it is.
Thank you for that. I just love the fact that how an idea of a group of 9 people became a global initiative and how you supported that. So thank you for that answer. And now, just to follow up, looking back on the day when you initially joined Barclays and comparing it to the present situation, what benefits has the diversity and inclusion initiatives brought to Barclays in that time period?
Again, the benefits of the last 5 years that I've been in this job have really got nothing to do with me. Barclays has a very strong commitment to driving social change and for social good. It was the reason that I joined the business in the first place. I knew that its commitment to citizenship and community investment was really powerful and very genuine. And the same applies for diversity and inclusion. We had some very strong foundations that we have continued to build on. But I think those foundations have served us very well over the last few years. We have really seen that focusing on all aspects of difference, of enabling everyone to bring their whole selves to work, has really been really helped us to create a very supportive and inclusive culture. One of the things that I think we have seen a shift from is a focus not just on diverse communities, on the diversity element of the D and D&I, but also that inclusive culture, really recognizing that we have to not just welcome, be a welcoming organization for all diverse communities, but that people need to feel included as well. One of the big shifts that we've seen is a focus on allyship. I'm not sure whether you've seen that at UCL, but allyship is a very powerful tool. So whether I belong to a community or not, I can actively demonstrate allyship. In some organizations, that can be wearing a pin badge or a lanyard. We do that, but it's actually much more than that. It's about demonstrating support. It's about calling out microaggressions. It's about standing side by side alongside diverse communities. And I've really seen that ramp up over the last few years, and seeing that sense of an inclusive culture across the business has been very, very powerful. But it's built on the foundations of strong diversity agendas. We have focused on gender, on disability and mental health, on our multicultural communities, multi-generational communities, and also our LGBT+ community. And increasingly, we're looking at issues of social mobility as well. So we have very strong foundations, and I've really seen that escalate in recent years.
That's great, Nicola. Thank you so much for answering Nicola's questions. I kind of like to move forward to what needs to be done. So first, starting with what are some areas where the financial industry needs to do better regarding D&I, and kind of to follow on from that, are there any initiatives that you're aiming to undertake to kind of address these gaps?
I think every organisation can do more, and you will find, and I know you're doing many interviews along these lines, but I doubt whether you will hear any head of diversity and inclusion say, we've got this sorted. I don't think anyone will say that. And that's the same in any industry. I think in financial services, and certainly at Barclays, we recognise that we need to be clearer in our accountability. We talk very powerfully about the fact that diversity and inclusion is part of our licence to operate. The regulators, the UK government, are holding businesses like us to account. We know that, we are just refining that and getting better at it. We have published targets around gender, women in senior leadership positions. We have reported on our gender pay gap before it was mandated by the government. We voluntarily reported on our ethnicity pay gap, and will continue to do so. We are in the process of setting ambitions for the ethnic diversity of the organisation. And I think all of these things are about us getting better at what we do. And I think you will see that across financial services. I think we have new challenges at the moment. We have new challenges post-pandemic. And again, the foundations that I referred to in a previous question will help us here. At Barclays, we have been operating an approach to flexible working, which we've called dynamic working, for a number of years. And this is about making sure that people can get the balance of their work and their non-work lives in better perspective, a better balance. We already had that in place, and I think that enabled us over the last year to move to 80% remote working very quickly. However, I think there are challenges as we move to new ways of working post-pandemic that will draw on some of those aspects of dynamic working, and we will have to get better at that as well, because it is a very different world. We have to make sure that we leave no one behind, that we don't revert back to old practices. And I think, as I say, we've had that approach for some time. So accountability, work-life balance, those would be areas that I would say we would continue to work on.
I completely understand. It's like an ongoing battle, and it's not gonna, I'm happy to hear that Barclays won't let up. It's nice to hear.
Not at all.
So kind of on a similar breadth, what has Barclays done in light of kind of recent historic events that have taken place, and what are kind of any changes you've implemented?
So I guess when you're talking about what recent changes, you're looking at the increased focus on racial inequity, for example, but probably also about some of the broader issues around some of the challenges for the LGBT+ community, and ensuring that women who are perhaps having to juggle multiple responsibilities are not left behind. There is no one community. I would suspect you're looking at all aspects of that with your question. Have I got that right, May?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you completely understand what I'm trying to get at. Sorry, yeah, continue.
Have we changed anything? I would go back to an earlier answer that says I think we had strong foundations, but we are certainly looking at all aspects of diversity and inclusion through a much more robust lens. What I think we have seen is a real heightened awareness and demand for action. And that concept of allyship that I've also referenced, that's really escalated. People saying, what more can I do? We published an allies toolkit within the organization to help our colleagues support other colleagues of difference. For our race and ethnicity work, we have published a 12-point action plan. And that was a commitment from the organization. We published that commitment. We're reporting on that commitment. And I think that's a very tangible response to the tragic events of last summer. Again, we have accelerated and highlighted our activity both around gender and on race and ethnicity. We continue to drive evidence through our benchmarks, and that's something that's very powerful. We are proud supporters of Stonewall. We deliver on the UK Gender Equality Index and are currently working on that for 2021. For our colleagues who consider themselves to have a disability, we are very mindful that in the UK, the government is shortly about to publish the National Disability Strategy. Barclays is a disability confident leader, and we respond to the Business Disability Forum disability standard to make sure that we can report on that. So each aspect of diversity we continue to drive forward and report on. And I think that comes back to a word that I used earlier on, which is accountability. We do hold ourselves to account and expect others to hold us to account as well. So although we know that there is so much more that we have to do, certainly the past 12 months have helped us to accelerate that activity and place much more increased emphasis on specific elements within that.
I understand there are a lot of nuances in D&I, like specific issues that need to be done. I appreciate you trying to hit all the marks there. Kind of referring to your recruiting strategy now, is there any way that your recruiting strategy has changed, and are you making moves towards eliminating bias from your recruiting process?
That's a slightly, that's an interesting question, because it could suggest that we've had to change direction, and I don't believe we have. I go back to the foundations that I referred to earlier on. Having said that, we constantly try to make sure that there is no bias in our hiring process. But we have put in place more tangible activities to reinforce that. So we make sure that we have diverse slates when we're recruiting. That is particularly important to us. Our 12-point Race at Work action plan talks about making sure that we understand the data. And I think you should be seeing this from a number of both financial services and professional services companies that are really looking to understand the data and the demographics of their organization. Now, by understanding that data, that enables us to spot where we have to fill gaps in our hiring process, and also to report. So we provide reports on gender. We have a gender dashboard that we report to all of our senior managers on both the hiring within their part of the business and also promotions and the number of people leaving within that part of the business. So we already had a gender dashboard. We have just put in place an ethnicity dashboard as well, so that we can do that. So we have diverse slates, we report to our senior leaders, we have a gender and ethnicity dashboard. And then with regards to bias, you may hear people talk about unconscious bias training. At Barclays, we flip that on its head, and we talk about building a culture of conscious inclusion as opposed to eliminating unconscious bias. Recognizing that we all have bias within us and how you respond to that is very important. But what we're trying to do is build a culture of conscious inclusion. How do I make sure that I really respect the difference that people bring to an organization, the talents that they bring, and where that point of difference adds value? And we know that there are very strong commercial reasons why having a diverse talent pool, having diverse population really makes an organization more productive and ultimately more profitable. And organizations like McKinsey will be able to provide you with very core evidence on that. So it isn't a nice to do, there's a very robust business case for making sure that our hiring, our promotions processes all respect that conscious inclusion that makes us a better business.
So kind of trying to integrate conscious inclusion into your employees' work life. Has there been any training for your employees or steps to make Barclays more inclusive? And in what ways have you integrated kind of multicultural issues as part of professional development?
Yeah, another great question. I'm loving these questions. You're really keeping me on my toes here. On both counts, let me answer that on a number of levels. I will work back, May, if I might. So this year we launched mandatory race and ethnicity training for all colleagues. That's a module that every member of Barclays staff around the world has taken or is in the process of taking. It's very interesting when you do the module, it does come through a lens of inclusion, but specifically looks at some of the issues related to race and ethnicity that enable us all to be better colleagues. It comes back to that concept of allyship again. We have also embedded an inclusion objective in every single member of staff's objectives for the year. So those are two very tangible activities that 2021 has seen implemented. There is other mandatory training as well, and I'll go back to Nicola's question about This Is Me earlier on. So we introduced mental health awareness training a couple of years ago. That is now mandatory too. And I think never before has that been more important than in the current climate, when colleagues will be returning to the office or returning to different ways of working, may have anxiety, may be concerned about their mental well-being. So you therefore see a suite of mandatory reporting and a mandatory objective in place that is both about race and ethnicity, but broader than that as well. And then if I ladder that up and look at this through a leadership lens, you know, looking at how your leaders are leading the organization, how they're making sure that opportunities are equitable for our colleagues, often starts from how an organization is led. And we have just held an inclusion summit. Previously that was gender focused, and this year we broadened that out to make sure that it looked at all aspects of inclusion. And over 500 of our colleagues, of our leaders within the organisation, have just done a 2-day inclusion summit, which really looks at building that sense of conscious inclusion within the organisation, but also through leadership. And then finally, our development opportunities. We have a robust portfolio of development opportunities at all levels of the talent pipeline. We have what we call a red thread of inclusion that runs through all of those development opportunities. So I hope that gives you a fairly comprehensive response to some of the things that we started, that we've honed, and that we're developing as well.
It's great to hear they were implementing the initiatives worldwide, not just in the UK. I think it's really important and quite impressive. How do you kind of manage to get the entire company, so including leadership, really involved and kind of participating in your diversity and inclusion initiatives?
I go back to the foundation. You know, Barclays has been doing this for a while. This is, although I'm always thrilled to talk about what we're doing and some of the new things, this really is rooted in who we are as an organisation. You can go onto our website and you can see the headings, but the evidence and the initiatives are there too. So it is something that means a lot to the organisation. There are some really common things that you will come across in other organisations that we have already in place. So we have employee resource groups or colleague networks that you will hear that are linked to the different diversity agendas. These are a very active group of people. I come from a voluntary background. That you know, we started off with Paulette coming from a charitable world. Actually, it was a voluntary charitable world. And what I see at Barclays are an extraordinary number of people who give their time to drive diversity and embed it within the organisation. So we currently have 7 diversity and inclusion networks. Again, to your point, May, there are around the world. You can go to Hong Kong and find a gender network. You can go to New York and you'll find an LGBT plus network. You can go to India and find a disability network. And in the UK, you'll find a network of emerging talent. And you'll find those all around the world. A Black Professionals Forum in the UK and a Latino Professionals Forum in the US. We have 23,000 unique members of those networks. Someone like myself might belong to 4 or 5. I would identify as, you know, joining the gender network as a woman. I would identify as an LGBT plus ally. I'm Jewish by faith, so I will join Embrace, our multicultural network, and so on. But 23,000, that's quite a big grassroots movement that keeps this, keeps the heartbeat of D&I going through the organisation. Then we have sponsors of those networks, people who are far more senior than me. We have executive sponsors of agendas. For gender, our chief executive is the executive sponsor. So Jess Staley will make sure that he speaks out on International Women's Day. He will speak about the importance of women in the talent pipeline and champion that at executive level. It was Jess who created the concept of what we call ex officio roles. So these are roles around our executive table that give underrepresented communities the chance to know what that is like to sit around that table. And I'll come back to that later on perhaps. So again, top down, bottom up. We have this grassroots movement of our employee resource groups, and we have senior sponsorship. We highlight key dates like, as I say, International Women's Day, or Black History Month in the UK in October, or Black History Month in the US in February. We will talk about International Day of Persons with Disabilities. We'll celebrate World Autism Month. So we keep that heartbeat of diversity and inclusion going through our networks and through our senior sponsors.
Perfect. Just to kind of wrap up then, bringing it back to the UCL M&A group, a lot of our members kind of come from underrepresented backgrounds within finance. Given your plethora of experiences in charity and in business, I was wondering what advice you could give them about breaking into the industry.
I perhaps slightly trivially, and I don't mean to trivialize this, don't see the barriers there. You know, don't believe that you can't. These are not exclusive opportunities. These are not exclusive industries. And I think there's a task force in the City of London at the moment that's looking at issues of social mobility. I referenced that earlier on, socioeconomic mobility. And it is all about making sure that those barriers are barriers to opportunity and barriers to progression are not there. We do talk about equity and the importance of equity now, not just equality of opportunity, but equity of opportunity. And organizations like Barclays and other businesses that you will be talking to will be saying, we're not just saying that we recognize everyone has equality of opportunity, but sometimes different interventions are needed to make sure that people have the same opportunities. And the things that I would suggest people look out for are, one, that transferability of skills. And I think, Nicola, you said that I would come back to that, and I will now. Who would have thought that a charity girl from, you know, Reading would have worked doing what I'm doing at Barclays? But I say very lucky. Some people say you make your own luck, but things like looking at managing multiple stakeholders, connecting in different activities at all stages of your career gives you those transferable skills for the future. So managing multiple stakeholders at different levels within your organization, the partnerships that you can create, all of those are very important. Seizing communications opportunities, great communication skills are always transferable and really come into fore in the different roles that people can consider within financial services. I did give this some thought beforehand, and it was a piece of advice that someone gave me years ago, and I didn't understand the term when they used it. And they said to me, Paulette, consider your sphere of influence. I was like, what on earth is a sphere of influence? It's your networks. And really looking at building your network, getting sponsorship, getting people to champion you, looking for role models in other organizations and reaching out to them. All of these are really, really powerful ways to make sure that the barriers that you might perceive are not there. Organizations like ours are, we're a sure here. We're a done deal. People are looking for talent to come into the organization with diverse perspectives, with different views, with different experience. That we know that will make us a better business. But we need to make sure that people don't see the barriers that are there. And I made reference to those ex officio roles that we have in Barclays. Those are designed for people who think that they don't have the experience. And at Barclays, they're very senior, but also things like internships, work experience, all of those will do all of the things that I've just suggested. They will help build transferable skills, help build a network, and help you see your sphere of influence so that those barriers are not there. Does that answer your question, or is there something deeper you would like from me?
No, I think that perfectly kind of describes the mentality with which we should enter our applications, and kind of the ways to remove perhaps, I guess, the pressure of entering finance as someone who comes from kind of an underrepresented background. So I really appreciate that. There's
just a so I've kept this very, you know, you've learned a little bit about me, but only a few bits. But as I say, I worked in the charity world first of all, and not my immediate family, but my extended family would say to me, "When are you going to get a proper job, Paulette?" I was director of communications at Save the Children, and they would say, "When are you going to get a proper job?" And you have to not listen to the people who are telling you that you can't do something, because actually sometimes you see the barriers, or other people are telling you that the barriers are there, but go for it if you can go for it.
Well, I'll definitely keep that in mind. I'm sure Nicola will when we enter our kind of summer application phase. To wrap up, I would like to say thank you so much for your time. It was really great to hear about kind of what you've done and what you're planning to do, as well as kind of Barclays more generally as a firm. And I kind of look forward to seeing how much you furnish that, you harness the power of business to further your social change. And yeah, hopefully we can keep an eye on what Barclays is doing in the future.
I'm really grateful for the opportunity. Thank you for reaching out to me. And I genuinely wish you all the very best, because it will be events like this, actually, that will, I hope, encourage other people to realize that those barriers aren't there, and to seize those opportunities. So I genuinely wish you all the very best with this series as well.
Perfect.
Thank you again, and especially for that last bit. I do hope that people will consider not only applying strictly for the M&A positions, but also consider maybe applying to the Diversity and Inclusion office as well. So yeah, thank you again. And to our viewers, please do consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel.